Godzilla Minus One. That's right, folks. The latest Godzilla film from Toho is here. It's been a little bit. Shin Godzilla came out in 2016. It has been 7 years since then. This is also the big 70th celebration of Godzilla, so this is kind of like the perfect time to release that. Isn't that amazing to think about? 70 years? That's crazy. And arguably now is the best time to be a Godzilla fan. We have Monarch, Legacy of Monsters. We have a new Kong Godzilla movie coming out next year, and now we have a Toho film, Godzilla Minus One. This one was always on my radar. I'm a massive fan of Godzilla. I love the old Toho movies. I just love that kaiju era where look at all these dumb monsters in big rubbery suits just mucking about. I love that energy so much, and it makes me smile. And I've always just liked the Japanese Godzilla stuff more than the American stuff. America has American sensibilities when it comes to these characters, and it never fully works for me when an American director or creative team develops this stuff. It always works better to me when you have that Japanese input, because this is based on a monster from the hubris of man. You never really feel that in the American representations. It always has to be, this is different. And more often than not, the earlier American versions, Godzilla has to become the hero as opposed to being a menace. So I like the Godzilla always being a little bit more of a threat to humanity than its defender, than somebody that just fights other monsters. I like a good up. This is the threat we're dealing with. It's a big, scary creature, a dinosaur-like being from an era we don't truly understand. I love that stuff. And this movie encapsulates that perfectly. Dare I say my favorite movie of the year. It's very hard for me to say that. This has been a pretty stacked year. In my opinion, there's been a lot of good movies to come out, but Godzilla Minus One just stands a little bit above most of them as being something that checks off every box I look for in a movie like this. It is well-paced. It is so beautifully shot. Every actor is giving the performance of their life. And that's what I love about this is we're taking it so seriously, where these actors understand, yes, we're doing the big disaster flick and it's going to be scary at times, but this is serious. This is about the intimacy of the characters and their personal lives and learning to accept their place in the world, which I just love to see that. The smartest decision that this movie made, and I stand by this, it's such a good choice from everyone involved, was not to set it in the present day. This takes place from pretty much right after the end of World War II to Japan's kind of following couple of years leading up to the events that would become, 1954's Godzilla, which is such a cool thing. Setting it in that era really goes back to what makes this character a timepiece to that era, because the original conception for Godzilla is nuclear testing led to this creature to be reawakened from another time period. It's man's fault that we have Godzilla attacking us. While this movie doesn't explicitly explore those themes in as great detail as previous versions, it is kind of this idea that is overarching throughout the entire piece, that man's hubris and man's fall is just something we've done to ourselves. This is very post-war Japan. We open up after the bombs drop. We go there right away. We follow a kamikaze pilot who doesn't want to die for his country, who's afraid of death, and he wants to survive. He wants to live. And you get the political stakes between him and other soldiers of people who are this is your sworn duty to your country to die for it, with people who are telling him, I don't want to die for it either. This is just the hand we've been drawn, this is where we're trapped right now. And that just is so cool. What a fun, unique story that it's not something that's not explored in Godzilla, but we're kind of in an era now, in terms of the way we tell stories, both in American stories and Japanese stories, where we can tell a little bit more of the intimacy involved in those events, where it's no longer painting it with a broad brush, where everything is just yes, for the country. It's more I love my country, I want to defend my country, but I'm not ready to die. I'm a young man. I don't want to just blow myself up for the sake of ending this war. What am I, the one individual, going to do? And that becomes the crux of the narrative for the main human character of this piece, Koshi, because he's a kamikaze pilot who inadvertently gets people in his army killed and he has to live with the fact that he survived. Survivor's guilt is a huge part of his character. He becomes this broken man who slowly realizes he can have something to live for. He goes back to his home that was just decimated by bombs and realizes he doesn't have his parents anymore. His people are destroyed. There's barely anything left. He finds this young girl. This young girl has a baby, and suddenly he becomes the surrogate father to this surrogate family. And as the years go on, he starts to develop like an actual happiness that he never had before. Maybe there is something to fight for. Maybe there is something to live for. You give me that alone, right? Like, this is a soldier who was supposed to die in the war. He's a humiliation to his people and his country. He hates himself for it. But now he has to come back to his village that was destroyed by bombs, and he starts to fall in love with this woman, and he becomes the surrogate father. That alone is a really cool story. That's impactful. That's meaningful. It's something that you could fully make today where people will have a new appreciation for it. The people of Japan in this movie do not fully love their government all the way. They don't like the choices that are made. They're like, we can't rely on them. We can't believe in them. That is a really cool premise that I'd watch a whole movie of. If you took out all the Godzilla stuff, like we didn't do that, even if it was like another disaster, maybe like another strike coming from the war, or not even that. This guy has to get a job to fend for his family, and slowly he starts to realize this isn't what he thought he wanted, but now it is what he wants. That's a beautiful story. And then you could change certain things up where maybe the woman in his new relationship, instead of the events that happened to her, they take place in a different thing. You could solely do that without Godzilla, and it's still probably one of the best movies I've seen this year because it's a beautiful script. You know, like we don't beat around the bush with a lot of it. It's not like silly and dumb where everything's like, oh man, look at this threat. We can't take it seriously. We take it seriously. Every character acts like they'd have a genuine reaction to what's going on. You have young men who are like, I want to die for my country too, and older men telling them, you shouldn't think going to war is something that's fun. This isn't a job that you should want. Not going to war is something you should be praised for. I think that's so cool and really impactful. And just having this man who was supposed to die suddenly see himself trapped in a world where he always survives. He survives more often than not in every situation he's in. And that itself is a really dangerous and cool thing. Koshi is such a well-rounded character. That actor whose name is escaping me, I'll put it on screen so you can see it. He is given so much to do. Like, his range is crazy. He gets angry. He gets sad. He's a broken man throughout most of this until the end when he has to become this fully realized individual who has something to fight for now. He couldn't fight for himself. Now he has something to fight for. It's really well done. It is really well done and such a beautiful piece. I dig that so much. And the supporting cast is just fantastic too. His surrogate family is great. The people on the boat, you know, you got the scientist, you got the captain, you got the kid. They're all great, and they're like realistic portrayals of men in this world, and you just love to see that. At the same time, this is like an homage to the original Godzilla movie, which we just talked about on this channel. I went in depth on that movie, one of my favorite films ever made. And I think this has so many of the similar beats where you feel like, oh yes, we're clearly taking inspiration to that movie in particular. You have the, meeting up of all like the smart minds of the community, just like, okay, this is the threat. This is how we neutralize it. We have the oxygen destroyer. We call it something different now. It's like a freon gas like cylinder that we can throw in. We have the scene, and we'll get to it in a minute, actually. It's clearly an homage to that original story, but it's taking new liberties that you'd make 70 years removed from that. The people don't fully love the government. We have new ways to tell the story and the technology. It can look a little bit more intense and lively. You can make it more personal than just here's a bunch of scientists working for the government. Now it's about the people in the community, which is one of the strongest decisions this movie makes, is making it about the community of people who no longer trust in themselves. They were in the war. They barely survived, and now they have a new threat to deal with. They're not going to do it for the government telling them to. They're going to do it for themselves and the future of their village, of their city, of their country. And that makes it so good. And that can lead us directly into the stuff with Godzilla, which is what a lot of people are here to see. And I was with an audience that was primarily young men around the age of me, and I think you could tell the ones in the theater that don't watch a lot of old school Toho Godzilla stuff and the ones that do. As somebody who does, this is how you do it. Like, in terms of the modern context for how we do Godzilla, we don't use the big rubber suits anymore. Sometimes we use practical effects, we do. But more often than not nowadays, it is the CG creature. And when you can do that, this isn't a big budget Hollywood movie. This, I believe, had a budget of $15 million in terms of like Japanese currency, which I think translates to just like under 50 million it would be for US. So that's not a lot of money. So sometimes you can tell an audience isn't fully engrossed in it if they're not used to seeing like how like these Toho movies are built this way. That, I mean, I get that when you're releasing this to like a wide release across, North America, you're going to have the audience members that only watch American films and they don't understand like the difference and stuff like this. But this is easily the best looking Godzilla film ever made. Easily from the Toho era, like this is the best looking one. The creature design, immaculate. It's like a big scary dinosaur dragon. The eyes are so creepy because they hardly move. I just like a grinning Godzilla with the big teeth showing. I think that looks fantastic. And I just love the way it moves through the water, where it is like a lizard slithering in the ocean, but it can also just like stand up straight at any point, and it's terrifying. It looks great. Like, there are so many effects of this thing in the water, and it never looks bad. It looks so incredible and cool. When we have all the big ships and the tugboats and everything, it looks incredible. And when it destroys the city, it's one of the best looking shots. Like, there's so much intensity and emotion thrown into all the sequences where Godzilla is attacking, because we're showing you the threat of this thing attacking right after a devastating attack on Japan. The sequence where we see Koshi and like his crewmen like evading Godzilla, like coming towards him, they're throwing like the mines off the boat. One of the best looking shots I've seen this entire year. Like every single aspect of that looked fantastic. And then just slowly seeing the creature come to the city and attack it. It's great. It's a very stiff Godzilla, which is exactly what the Toho ones do. It is just like it's like a fucking brick house, right? It's just, you're watching this lumbering creature slowly make its way towards the destination so slowly, but it's huge. I think it's one of the bigger ones that Toho has done for sure. When it's attacking Ginza, I think that's what it's called. There's just so many references and homages to the original movie, like the reporters on top of like the roof talking about like the creature coming towards them, and then the roof collapses, just like all the power lines being destroyed. And it looks great. And every time Godzilla uses its charge to like actually like shoot the atomic blast, it is such a different take on it from like classic stuff. I love it. The like scales on the back of the tail spike up till it keeps going up and up and up to the top of the head, and then it shoots out in like a nuclear blast where it fires. You see it fire, then like the implosion comes a distance later, and it devastates. This is a deadly creature that is a killer. It's a killer. It's so deadly and dangerous and badass, and it looks so great. And the way the camera moves with this creature, like the opening fight sequence with the creature where we're doing like a POV from underneath Godzilla and we're watching it move over all these soldiers, is so intense, to the final battle where we have both ships and airplanes swooping about in every direction trying to distract this thing. It is so gorgeous. It is such a beautiful movie in that aspect alone, and it's such like a beautiful way to destroy this creature, because it's a human realistic way. We have an idea, we're going to implement it. If that doesn't work, we go to plan B. Maybe all the plans working symbiotically will actually destroy this thing. Maybe it won't. We don't really know anymore. We don't know how this is going to go. It ends on a beautiful note like that. I love it so much, and it's such an intense piece. It's emotional, and I know like it's hard for some, like, I think North American audiences to fully grasp like what we're doing here, just because we are decades removed from the attacks on Japan and the decimation of cities. And you know of that stuff, you've always known about it, but in Japan, they still think about that stuff. Like, it's still events that are poignant there. So when you see a destruction of a city again, and you see maybe there are certain survivors to attacks, and people just learning that they can find happiness again and they shouldn't like rely on the hate, there is something truly poignant and intimate about that that doesn't really come across in a North American audience. If you can see that and sense that, it's really impactful and cool. And that's not always going to work for everybody. I know that. I'm aware of that some of the things that are like cheesy to North American eye work really well in Japan. And somebody who watches a lot of Japanese films and has seen all of these Godzilla films, all these beats work for me. It is one of the most beautifully intimate stories of the human characters we have seen in a kaiju movie like this. You're rooting for them at every turn. They're all distinct people. They have distinct visuals. And just the way we tell stories now and we pace stories now, it gives them more empathy. It makes us like them more. Everything is just working on every conceivable level. There's not a single flaw in this movie. It does so many unique things to the Godzilla mythos, to the Godzilla character, to a Godzilla movie, while still homaging what makes Godzilla great in the first place. It is clearly in love with the first movie. It is a love letter to the first movie and to this creature and to Japan for surviving these attacks. That is the other thing that matters about this. We are talking about this tragedy that befall an entire nation where lives were lost on an unknown scale. And now they have another creature to attack, and it's the people who have lost and have sacrificed for their country now willing to step up for that country's future. That's a really cool message to bring here. It's just like the revolution of we don't need the government to defend our country. We have to defend it ourselves. A very poignant message for today's climate, and I know that, and maybe not everyone's going to grasp that, but it's really cool to see. And all of the monster attacks look fantastic. There's no point that you're rooting for Godzilla, which is something I personally love to see. I don't want to have to root for this big guy. I want to see him get his ass kicked. And he does, with World War II era technology, which is what I love. There's no big exploding guns or whatever. We have some big bombs, some big shells that we can deliver big bullets in. That's it. That makes it really cool. That makes it special. That makes it worthwhile. This is a great movie. And it's easily one of the best Godzilla films ever made. It's easily one of the best acted Godzilla films ever made. And easily one of the best films of the year. If you have the ability to see this on a big screen, I don't even know, like a 4DX even, it's great because my cinema, I have to bring this up too. My cinema, I saw it in an Ultra AVX screening, the Dolby Atmos surround sound. When Godzilla first comes to Ginza, the lights in the theater changed color to match the tone of Godzilla stepping in. I lost my mind. I'm like, are you kidding me? We're actually committed to this for the Godzilla movie? Are you kidding me? How am I ever supposed to see Kong x Godzilla the New Empire knowing this is what I can get here? It's great. It's perfect. It is perfect. I love every aspect of this movie. So, Godzilla Minus One. I am going to give a 10 out of 10. Now, thank you all for watching this review. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. As always, you can check me out on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. And of course, I will catch you in the next one. Have fun. Stay safe. You're the future, folks. Fight for it. Good luck.